Duval City Council meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. And clerk, could you please provide the flag for our flag salute this evening? All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Brudnicki. Councilmember Iyer.
Present.
Councilmember McHenry.
Here.
Councilmember Remington.
Here.
Councilmember Hoag.
Here.
Councilmember Napland.
Here.
Councilmember Langle.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Under additions or corrections to the agenda, under consent, please add payroll for June 5th, 2020 in the amount of $301,360.75, and claims for June 16th, 2020 in the amount of $259,946.53. Are there any council members that would like to speak this evening? We have Hoag, Napland, and Iyer. Put that down just a second here. All right. With that, do we have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda?
So moved, Amy McHenry.
Michelle Hoag, second.
So we have Councilmember McHenry move to approve the agenda. Councilmember Hoag move to second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. All right, moving on, do we have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda?
Michelle Hoag, I move to approve our consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so Councilmember Hoag moved, Councilmember Iyer seconded adoption of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And with that, we are at our opportunity for comments from the audience. Clerk, have we received any written comments?
I have not received anything.
Okay.
I have not received anything, no.
All right, and we do have, it looks like we do have members of the public on the line, so if you can raise your hand if you would like to speak, and then we'll call on you and then provide your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak for public comment this evening?
I hope I didn't say video on there. Oh, raise your hand down here, probably.
I do see somebody with a 206 number that looks like they were talking. Is that, Jody, can you see hands?
I can't see a hand, but I can see, I have unmuted them, so we can hear them if they want to speak up.
Okay, so somebody whose phone number starts with 206, were you wishing to speak?
If that's us, no, we're just attending for the first time.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a difficult format, a little bit challenging, so we just want to make sure no one gets missed. And so I'll just call for one more time to see if anyone else on the line has public comment. And I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. Thank you. Under Mayor's report, first and foremost, I have a proclamation to read this evening. It definitely has been quite the heavy month, I think, in the year for all of us. But one important day that our state has been striving to make a holiday for years, and the federal government looks like it finally may, is the holiday of Juneteenth, which is the date that President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation ending slavery in the United States. And I'd like to read that to the body. Whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, setting in motion the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas the Civil War ended with the surrender of General Lee at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865. And whereas this news reached Texas when Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston Bay with Union troops, it was on June 19th, 1865 that he announced, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." And whereas celebration of the end of slavery, which became known as Juneteenth, is the oldest known public celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and celebrates the successes gained through education and greater opportunity. And whereas, on a larger scale, celebration of Juneteenth reminds each of us of the precious promises of freedom, equality, and opportunity, which are at the core of the American dream. And whereas the Washington State Legislature recognized Juneteenth during their 2007 regular session, now therefore, I, Amy Okerlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim June 19th as a day to celebrate Juneteenth 2020 in the City of Duval. And, you know, it amazes me that this hasn't become a national holiday yet. In recognition, I think one of the, Mayor Pro Tem Remington said it really well during our committee, the whole, that there's just a lot going on, a lot's coming to the surface, as it should. And I know that a lot of the protests that folks are having, there's opinions on both sides, but the most important thing that's happening is a national dialogue on what it means and what it means to be a person of color or what have you in our country, and the experiences that those people go through every day that none of us on this line could ever understand. And I feel like the country's finally starting to make some real progress after a generation of stalling. And I'm hoping that more cities will join in doing these proclamations and adding diversity and inclusion language to policies and what have you. As part of my report, I did want to say I did have the opportunity to participate in the Black Lives Matter March last Friday, and I believe Councilmember Lingle and Councilmember Iyer were there as well. Our State Senator Manka Dhingra came out, as well as Representative Larry Springer. We estimate that there were over 300 people there. So it was a fantastic showing, and I have to say that 10 years ago, I never would have dreamed that that would have been the turnout in our community, which says that our community as a whole has come a long ways, but there's still a long ways to go. There's still, systemic racism built into our long-term institutions, and there has to get momentum to make the changes necessary to make sure it doesn't exist anywhere. So it's an issue that's near and dear to my heart, and to Mayor Pro Tem's Remington point with our police department, and discussing how far they have come in the last 7 years. I also want people to recognize that these issues of racism and discrimination and what have you impact their families as well. They have families beyond what you see in uniform, and many of those families are very diverse. And so when someone lumps one of our officers in with a bad crowd, it can be very painful for those folks personally, because they're dealing with those exact same issues in their own families. So I just wanted to make sure that people think about that as well. And all of the issues are important, and we need to make sure they're all addressed. But we also need to keep our eye on what is going well and then what needs to be fixed. So it looks like things have finally started to calm down a little bit in the region, which is a good thing, although there are more incidents over the weekend in other states that are absolutely tragic. And I think that if we as a body, as a group, need to continue to keep our foot on the gas and start moving moving what we can forward, and part of that is being supportive of some of the criminal justice reform that our department's already done, as well as ideas coming out of law enforcement. Because one thing I know for sure is that law enforcement can't carry the weight of reform on their own, because of in other areas of the country they have significant resistance within their own departments, and that it's going to take everybody moving some of those things forward. Not a very eloquent way to say it this evening, but I just wanted to share that with folks. And then as far as activities, last week was really consumed with trying to make sure that we didn't have a Seattle-like or Covington-like situation come to Duval. We were very fortunate. And so while council is set to affirm the declaration of civil emergency for last week, it is now being withdrawn. We waited until after the weekend from some intel that there might have been some other things going on, that we wanted to make sure that the police chief had the tools he needed. But that seems to have passed at this point, and I hope that we never have to issue one again. So Councilmember Naflin did mention in Committee of the Whole, the Association of Washington Cities annual conference next week. So I do hope to see your faces on that. Sound Cities Association has our board meeting tomorrow. Much of what we've been focused on is, again, COVID and everything going on in the community. The Puget Sound Regional Council General Assembly is next week. It will be held virtually, so we still have voting delegates. As last I checked, I was the only one signed up for it. So if you haven't attended and didn't want to take a drive to Seattle, this is another great opportunity to sign up and be part of the process. With that, we're really trying to catch up, but I think we all at City Hall feel like we're falling farther and farther behind. So we appreciate patience when we get it, and trying to keep the city humming while dealing with all of these issues that that just were not expected in the year 2020. So with that, that's all I have. Any questions? Okay. So moving on, Councilmember Hoag.
Hi, I just wanted to give a report from the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee meeting I was at last week. So there's one item on our agenda that is kind of important, I believe, to Duval, and it has to do with emergency management. So Sound Cities and many special purpose districts within King County are served by 2 zone coordinators who act as independent advocates within the regional emergency management system, and they support cities in fulfilling their emergency responsibilities under state law. The zone coordinators are especially important for small cities and special purpose districts that do not have full-time emergency managers to support their work, like ours. Recently, King County Office of Emergency Management notified the zone coordinators that their contracts would be terminated effective June, which is this June. Zone partners were informed that their duties would be absorbed within existing county staff. The decision was made without consulting with the EMAS, which is Emergency Management Advisory Committee. Following feedback from concerned cities, and I'm sure our mayor was part of that as well, members of the EMAC and Sound Cities Association, the contracts have now been extended through the end of 2020. So that the Director of Office of Emergency Management has agreed to engage with zone partners and emergency EMAC in a discussion for the next steps. So I did get feedback from the mayor and also from Sean Tozer during this meeting. So yeah, I'm really glad to have had their input. I don't know if the mayor has anything else you want to say about that.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations where I think a department got out ahead of the executive on this, and without consultation, as Mr. Tozer put it during one of his reports a couple weeks ago, it was literally dropped on a group of emergency managers at the end of the meeting, and the phone call abruptly stopped. So it put all of us into action mode, and so I immediately reached out to Councilmember Lambert and our county executive on the issue. And the county executive's office was just learning about it at that time. So I have no doubt that the executive's office stepped in to help make this interim decision, but some of the concerns that I shared with Councilmember Hoag, and we've been discussing as part of the Sound Cities Board, is that the danger of these contractors going in-house is that those positions can be shifted elsewhere when we need them most. And our zone coordinator has been extraordinarily helpful, responsive, and we need that independent but county paid voice so that we can have our needs addressed out here in the Valley. I'm cautiously optimistic that they will change their plan and keep these folks as contractors so that we can have more long-term assurance that they won't be absorbed into county government and moved to different priorities. So that's that. Thank you, Councilmember Hoag, for representing us at PIC. Councilmember Napland.
Thank you. So I have a couple things to report on. First, I attended 2 transportation related meetings. One was the East Side Transportation Partnership. They had kind of a joint regional meeting with some of the other regional committees, and also Snoqualmie Valley Transportation Coalition. And a couple of things that came out of that. One surprised me. Metro, Sound Transit, these organizations rely very heavily on sales tax revenue, and they are facing just extraordinarily hard decisions. And do they raise taxes? Do they reprioritize, scale back, extend timelines on projects? Surprisingly, fares only pay for about 7% of the cost of these programs. So at least I believe that was the Sound Transit number. So anyway, I'm assuming we'll see more in the future. I'm hoping they don't try to do a tax increase when we're all struggling. So I'm hoping they're going to look at some other options, but I just wanted to give a heads up on that. And also some other good news might be coming out tomorrow about bus routes in and out of Duval. So we need to watch for that. And the mayor is connected and should release something tomorrow with some more information. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is the procurement policy. As we were working on it in Finance Committee, brought up the question of where does stipends fall? Does it fall within this policy? And it appears that the current kind of justification of how stipends are working did fall within the chapter of code that will be replaced by this procurement policy. And as we've discussed more about the timeline and how long this will take, it was suggested that it might be a good idea to just take care of it, the question about stipends, as soon as possible, so we don't have it rearing its ugly head. And I've looked back at all the emails and memos and discussions, and it's I just think that that's really a waste of taxpayer dollars if we can just make a decision and implement it as soon as possible. And it could be as simple as in the chapter where it talks about procurement and service contracts, we could just say this excludes any contracts with employees, something like that. But as I was speaking with Anne Marie and we were discussing this concept, her request was that I bring it to the whole council and get a consensus or not a consensus. If council's even interested in seeing, a quick line of code that we could insert that would take care of this. So if the procurement/contracting policy is going to take a little longer to get it implemented, that it might be a good idea to just lay this to rest. But I wanted to ask the rest of council if they would even like to have our attorney bring us, a line of code that could potentially solve this issue.
So Councilmember Napland, to that point, I just wanted, before council discusses this, I want to make clear the stipends that we have exist within council approved city attorney contracts and the 2 PIO contracts with union members. So when looking at that, if council makes the decision to do away with our PIO stipends, we don't have public information anymore, or we have to pay for. So just let me finish. And so this is just something that could be an unintended consequence. And so again, you know, Anne Marie's suggestion was to work with me because nobody likes the word stipend, so we need to do something different. But we have to be careful also in how this impacts the services that the community is receiving right now as a result of at least a couple of those, and that there is a union involved in the two that are not contracts that go through council.
I just want to clarify that the intention would not be to cancel, terminate stipends. The purpose is to clarify
Okay, perfect.
the signature authority, because the ability for the mayor potentially to sign this was loosely linked that it could be a service contract. Now, obviously employees aren't contractors, so you know, it's a little problematic. So just to clarify,
Okay.
it would remove the signature authority of the mayor. Potentially, I don't think it currently does fall into that category, but it would clarify that any agreement between the city and an employee would require council approval. That's all it does. So it wouldn't cancel any existing.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make clear.
I just wanted to clarify that. I can see you were heading down a line. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Councilmember Lingle.
Okay, great. I'm not mute. One of my, I don't know I know very little about stipends in the past, and I've made that clear to people that I've spoken with. But one of the things that has always bothered me about stipends and separate agreements is that I think job descriptions really, and I'm not saying this has to happen right away, but I think we need to move to a methodology where job descriptions that are with roles and responsibilities that are ongoing are not a patchwork of information.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons I feel this way, aside from just the accuracy of things, is that there's really two pieces to it. Number one, but most important to me, is that when you have complete information, we're in a better position to understand when tasks will change.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I've seen job descriptions in the past and have done them myself, is that situations change. Somebody doesn't want to do something anymore, somebody else does. You have an opportunity to make those adjustments with council's knowledge. And during the budget process is one of those times. And Councilmember Naplin once before showed some language, I think it was from Bothell, that gave some flexibility in code eventually to keep some things really tight there. But there's another thing that's really super, super important to me personally, having been in the development business as a female, which is, and I'm not saying this has happened, but I think it's really, really extremely important that we are cognizant that job descriptions and compensation doesn't inadvertently have an inequity. And I definitely experienced that myself. And so I don't want that to happen in the future as we develop as a city.
Yeah, no, to your point, Councilmember Lingo, that's another one of the underlying reasons of doing that workload analysis and looking at all the job description, is right-siding all that stuff that may have been done differently in the past. So yeah, good feedback. Thank you. Councilmember Iyer.
Yeah, I guess it seems like we're having an impromptu discussion on this, so I'm going to go ahead and throw my 2 cents in. Yeah, I like the idea of clarifying the process for everybody involved, and I think I understand that we have some just difficulties working out all these disparate tasks with a limited workforce, and I get that. I think my general concern with these tools that used is that what they produce is a less than transparent salary for public employees, and don't think that was intentional, but it makes it so it's difficult to see what those positions are paid, and it makes it less transparent. So, and just the reality of public employees is that it's all, as we all know, public information. So that's my main that's my primary kind of gripe. I know that there's a lot of position descriptions. That's a whole ball of wax unto itself. And
Are you sure you don't want to do it, Matthew? Just kidding.
I'm mostly concerned about the transparency of salary and understanding how that impacts the budget and how that fits into some random person can walk up and figure it out.
Yep.
So with that, I would support the effort of simplifying and clarifying for everyone's sake. So.
Yep. Councilmember Hoag.
I'm also in support, Jennifer, of bringing something like this forward. I don't think it's as simple as just changing the name. Not calling it a stipend anymore doesn't change the fact that people are getting paid for extra work. So I don't think it's necessarily the name I don't know. If we're still paying someone for that extra work, it's still what we've known as a stipend in the past, right? It's still the same thing.
It can be. I think yeah, and I think part of it is defining. So while previous mayor, did this for previous city administrators and then the PIOs, we also, I think, really need to take a close look at, how much work they're actually doing for what they're getting basically on an hourly basis. And having a monthly number is simple for budgeting processes, but that may not be the best way to do it as well. So there's a lot to look into in that to make sure that we have flexibility, but still have that transparency and accountability. And we'll work through it. We'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of effort. Councilmember Iyer.
Sorry to jump back in, but in clarification, my thought process was, we address the process going forward, and then my point was that the look back is much more complicated than the look forward, and unraveling it or changing it or making it appropriate to how we feel, what we feel is appropriate going forward is a much more complicated process. And I think we could piecemeal it out. This could be a portion that we could all just get over with, move on, and then get on to the more complex, and hopefully that would be something that could be more handled through, like as the mayor indicated, like a salary survey type effort.
Exactly. Ms. Thomas and then Ms. McHenry.
I was just going to be really quick. Dana and I have been talking about this a lot lately, just so that we make sure that it is transparent, obviously, to the community and to council. So one of the things that we're looking at is, as we do the budget, that we have essentially like a salary ordinance. So if there are people that get, I don't want to call them a stipend anymore, whatever we're going to call it in the future, that'll identify it in a public document so you can see who, kind of how that works. Not that it's just budgeted and somehow rolled into a larger salary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
Really quick.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember McHenry.
Just wanted to say that I support Jennifer's idea, and I'm interested in seeing that move forward as well.
All right. Councilmember Iyer, you had a report as well?
Right, thank you. It's been interesting. Well, it's been a tough weekend or a tough week or tough, I don't know, for a lot of folks. And, I just felt like I wanted to say something. I really struggled with the scope of, and I spent a lot of time driving in my car talking to myself, which I don't know, people might think I'm crazy. But so I'm just going to read what I wrote on Facebook in terms of, paraphrase it, I guess. I was out Friday supporting my community and neighbors in solidarity, trying to hold the gaze of the nation on the injustices of the death of Black people at the hands of police. Honestly, I would rather not post on Facebook nor go out, generally look away. But a call from a friend, heartbroken by this very common sentiment among white folks, compelled me to say something and try to do something. I recognize that the power of the police is a power I give them as a citizen, and it can be expressed. It can be an expression of my fear of the other. I owe it to Black people and to police officers to try to be part of a better community. The video of George Floyd's death shows us a truth, and we must not look away. You know, I think I just felt like I had to say something in terms of to both the community and to our, to our police officers who I greatly respect, and generally I identify with police officers probably more than they, as being a middle-aged white guy. And I think seems like a pretty cool profession. And I like living in a community with police, and but these events definitely made me want to be introspective about my world perspective and the things that drive some of my decision making, and my preference for more police, and then just being open to that conversation of how policing occurs, and and I think that my statement is generally to say that I'm going to be supportive of our state and federal elected officials, the steps that they can take, because I think much of the issues of excessive use of force come down to how laws are adjudicated in our court system, and they're at a very high level, and I guess it's just an acknowledgement that I'm willing to be open to that conversation. And we have a small part to play with our own police department, and I think that they've done a really good job to the changes that they've made, and frankly, I don't know enough about our police department and how they operate, and I look forward to talking with Chief Hurt and being part of that community. But the one thing I do also look forward to is keeping the police force as part of our community, and keeping them close, and for both the reason that the community can humanize police officers, but also that the police officers can humanize the community that they're in. So anyway, so that's it, and I look forward to hopefully to struggle to continue, I guess. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I know that was heartfelt, and appreciate that. Just on the issue of what our police department has done, I did want to say that the police department over the next few weeks, no other incidents barring it, are going to be pulling together more information about what they've actually done over the last 7 years. When Chief Hurt took over, the first thing he did was start the community oriented policing program, and that is where a lot of our dollars go, is to those outreach efforts and connecting with the community. And so hopefully that will bring a lot to light as well of what it takes to staff a 24/7 agency, and why they're doing what they're doing. It's, I knew we'd done a lot of the stuff that has been recommended in the 8 Can't Wait and other campaigns, but to see how much we actually have done before it even became a huge nationwide issue speaks a lot to the leadership and the command staff within the police department, with Chief Hurt and Lieutenant DeBach and Lieutenant Saborin. So, I do look forward. Obviously they do their annual reports and talk about their work plans, but it's an opportunity to get a little more in depth and share with the community more of what they do. And so we're going to make that happen for folks. One interesting stat that came up during one of my conversations with Chief is somebody wanted a report on how many times our officers use of force. And he goes, you know what? I can count on one hand the amount of times our officers have had to pull a taser on somebody in the last 5 years. So that speaks a lot to our community as well as their training and de-escalation in using nonviolent methods to work with folks. So still there's always work to do. And there's always improvements to be made, but when we get to the point of legislative agendas and national reform, the more help we can get from council to push some of the key reforms forward on a law basis rather than just a department by department basis will be very helpful. Councilmember Lingle, you're on mute.
See, wouldn't you like me to stay on mute?
No.
I was raised in a community with a very substantial African-American population. They were part of my church upbringing. They were instrumental in how I went to college and how I spent my career. And this most recent event brought many tears to our family. And I shared many of those tears with many, many, many old African-American friends, colleagues that are still part of my life. And the one thing I learned working in an African-American community predominantly for so many years is that, I'm trying to think of an easy way to say this, is that it's very important for all of us to constantly remind ourselves and be self-evaluating around perceptions, information that might be creating unintended bias.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a lifelong journey. And if someone hasn't had, the experiences that I had growing up, it would definitely be very hard to start that process. And so I've always loved neighborhood night out here, and I've been involved in national stuff around that. But anything we can do, I think, to start looking inward as individuals as well as a city, and do a little more education, have a few more conversations with people that don't necessarily look like us. Because our council is obviously white. So anything we can do that way, I think we should look for some opportunities. And, the mayor is very attuned to other opportunities around through Association of Washington Cities or whatever, and there may be other dialogues that I do hope will at least consider, if not directly participate in those opportunities, because I sense that they'll come forward.
Thank you. All right, moving on, do we have any council committee reports this evening? I see Councilmember Hoag moving. Did Councilmember Hoag want to give a report on Finance Committee, or? If not, that's okay.
I wasn't ready, but I can. So we did get an update, which I know that we did during the committee, the whole meeting as well, but we got an update from Laura on the Duval Village. We did spend a lot of time talking about the procurement policy. And I guess there's really not a whole lot to say because we went over the financial statements, the April financial reports, and got an update on budget, which we've done a lot of that during the committee of the whole. So the only thing is that if council wants to review the documents that we received, you can, I believe you can access them if you just go to the document center that Jody sent, the link that Jody sends us. You can access all of the, like the Lake Stevens policy that we've been working on, and all of those documents are there. So if you wanted to start looking at them, you've got access there. So that's it.
Thank you. And Ms. Thomas, did you have any further administrative reports this evening?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Laura Thomas. Mine will be just a little bit longer than normal because, you know, like Council and the Mayor, I wanted to share some of my thoughts, mostly as a co-worker, but also as an administrator for the city. Last week was probably one of the darkest weeks we've had in my career. When you have a police department that's attached, you know, to your unit. And as an administrator, it definitely weighed on my heart. We had a lot of really difficult conversations last week internally that lasted a really long time. And so I know the mayor reached out to the PD, and I have reached out to the PD. And I'll just kind of paraphrase what I said, because I think it's important that as administrators and even as elected officials, that, you know, we provide support for our community, whether it's the Black Lives Movement or if it's, you know, with our internal police department. So essentially what I said to them, and this is, you know, and this is really from my heart, is I've been discerning these past months and weeks on the state of our country. COVID has isolated us from one another, and we miss those interactions with our work family. As we were beginning to see the light at the end of a very long tunnel, we witnessed a video as a nation that would reignite decades, if not centuries, of racial tension within our nation. And I wanted to personally make sure that I thanked them and shared my support and gratitude to our police department. They're an example of community policing done right. They join one of the most stressful, difficult, honorable, and rewarding professions of public service. And for that, I'm grateful as a citizen, a co-worker, and as administrator. My ultimate goal and our ultimate goal is to see them safely return to their families at the end of the day. There are difficult days within that profession. You know, what I've said to them is, you know, stay strong, be focused, stay safe. And again, I'm grateful for their profession, and I'm proud to call them my coworker. As many of you know, I always try to leave, you know, a little bit extra, you know, in an email. And I shared this with the council member last week. A speech that I always go to in dark days in our country is by Teddy Roosevelt. It was in 1910, and it was a speech in France called Citizenship in a Republic, and it's called Man in the Arena. And if you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to read it, because I think it'll bring it to, you know, I think it'll help define what our roles are as elected, but also as citizens of this country. So I'll leave it at that, because I am really grateful to our group. I also wanted to thank council. As you know, my role changed officially yesterday from interim city administrator to deputy city administrator. So I have a more limited role, but I did want to just say, you know, I am eternally grateful for the opportunity that you gave Carrie and I, and we both learned a lot out of this. But now I'll actually really talk more about the rest of the admin. So you did receive an email. We issued the RFP this week for solid waste services. So we're really excited about that. So we'll have more information in about almost 3 months. It's about a 3-month process. So we're really excited about that. Everybody's already talked about procurement, so I don't need to beat that up anymore. We are in the process of looking at our reports from our salary and compensation survey work that's been done. And I want to thank council for everybody that provided feedback to our consultant, Ross. That was definitely invaluable to hear, not just from our staff members, but from our mayor and our council as well. So we have a report that we've looked at that's starting to look at, you know, what our consultant believes are comparable. So that will come at a future meeting to council to look at. We will start the process of negotiation with the unions pretty soon, and also looking at the comparables with them. Again, on 7/14, we have quarterly reports by departments. One thing that I noticed, and you might have all seen this in the news, is that retail taxes have rebounded a bit. So they were up this month. However, they're still 6% where they were last year when you compare month over month. So I think there's definitely some bright news, which is good. I think that's it for me this evening. Thank you again.
Thank you. And we do not have a fire district update this evening. I apologize, I forgot to remove that from the agenda. It's been a while since Chief Burke has come to talk to us, and I'm hoping that he will come and talk to the council in the near future. We do not have a presentation this evening, but we do have a public hearing for the 2021 to 2026 six-year transportation improvement program.
Mayor, I believe that Ms. Thomas had a quick thing to say.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I had one thing on my list. It was the bottom, and this is fairly recent. With us potentially going to phase 2, we're looking at opening up our field. So we're starting to talk about that in emergency management. So stay tuned. We might be able to open up our fields pretty quick. Sorry, that was it.
Thank you. So we now have the public hearing on the 6-year TIP. Mr. Lenishevsky, I will go ahead and open the public hearing without a gavel and let you make your presentation.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Mayor, council, citizens, Steve Lenishevsky, Public Works. So we are at the point in time for our annual update to the Transportation Improvement Program. I am going to steal the screen. Okay, minimize this. Sorry, one more second. Okay. So with that said, I will present this for the public hearing. So I believe the clerk opened the public hearing. Yes. Or, okay. So just briefly, requirements. We list our changes and then going over schedule. Most of you have seen this. The city staff did present to the Planning Commission last week at their regular scheduled meeting. It was a quick discussion, not a lot of questions. I believe no public comment, question, or involvement, but yet it was not a hearing. The TIP is required by the state. We are required to annually adopt one by July 1st. The ramifications of not doing that are not set in stone. However, they do like everything submitted, as it helps the state with all of their funding needs that they report to their own state and federal level. All the items on our list are supported in our transportation element of the comprehensive plan. We are not amending our comprehensive plan or the transportation improvement project list. We are just updating our project program as it is listed and defined. This program helps us with funding eligibilities for grants. It allows us the opportunity for more grant eligibility. It is needed and required by the state. It helps us coordinate with other programs and projects. This year, there are only 3 changes to the TIP, and they are the successful completion of 3 projects, half of M7, which is a 1st/2nd Avenue within the Toll Brothers project, 3rd Avenue extension from 143rd down to Big Rock, and then frontage along Big Rock Road from where the Safeway project ended to the intersection of 140th Street and wrapping around to the south side of Safeway. We take this opportunity to list other project-related elements that are partially completed and or part of development application process completions, because they are important for our Complete Streets program. So these are the items that we report on. It's a little different. We report on miles of roadways, length of sidewalk, length of bike path, and regular path. This year's list, again, only has 3 changes, which are reduction in our list and getting projects done and completed. The information was public. It was in the packet, so I do not intend to go over the many lines of projects, but you can see the projects help complete the roadway network via the map on Exhibit B. There are many projects to do and make improvements to our transportation system. This is just a tool to help us get there. So having presented the list, we have introduced this. We've shared with the Planning Commission. We have a hearing date tonight. Department of Commerce, I did note in the staff report, does not comment on this element. It's not comprehensive plan related. They treat it as a planning and budgetary style document. So there's no comprehensive plan changes. They do not need to comment. So as brief as that was, that concludes the public presentation from city staff.
All right, clerk, do we have any members of the public still on the line?
We do, and I am going to allow them to speak now.
Okay. So do we have anyone attending in the audience that would like to provide public comment on the TIP this evening?
Thank you for the opportunity, but no, we were just learning about all of the information that was shared.
All right. So is that we do not have public comment?
It does not.
We have no public comment.
Okay, I apologize. I'm just trying to make extra sure that we reach everybody that is here. So with that, yes?
The clerk did not receive any written comment.
Correct. So let's make the record reflect that. And with that, the public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to first item of new business, Agenda Bill 20-51. It's a resolution for surplus for introduction, Mr. Laniszewski. And this is one just that will require a public hearing before approval.
Good evening again. Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. Let's see. I don't know if I should share my screen, but periodically the staff of the city does have to get rid of broken, disrepairable, or end of service life items. So what we have for this, we do it about every quarter. It may be a little longer, but we're trying to get caught up on getting rid of things as they are determined to be surplus. So we have 8 items, and I was asked today to add another one. And since this is fluid, as we have not yet had a hearing, I did talk to the clerk and the mayor about sharing that. I wasn't sure if the screen just changed because I can't see what you see. Is there a new item number 9 on what you're looking at in red?
There's not.
Okay, we'll push this button again. Up share, new share.
It's still the same.
Yeah.
There we go.
So it was adding a printer that had been removed from one of the public works offices on an upgrade. So one vehicle out of the police department, a couple of trash pumps. I should switch to a picture that you can actually see. So these things in orange we call them trash pumps. They're either I think these are 4-inch trash pumps. Suck water out of a hole and push it somewhere that we don't want to be working in. Old weed eaters, office supplies, an old lawnmower, which I've learned is at least 18 years old. So that's the gist of this programming. A question was raised today, and the mayor and staff had a chance to talk about where the resources go upon surplus sales. Policies kind of put it where it came from, but I think it's a great discussion to have. So outside of the items on the list, I think we're gonna probably chat about where those resources go. I know Dana had some thoughts there as well, and Councilmember Naplin brought that question forward today. So those are all the points I have to share. We will do a hearing as utility items per RCW are required to have a public hearing. And some of the stuff too, like the mower, nobody knows what account it was bought from. So there's that element that we have to consider. You could say it's for parks and streets, but you know what? I'm sure it mowed the lawn and the grass around the water tanks. So there's, to be fair and transparent, we don't know on some of these items because they are so old. So that's all I have to say.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Laniszewski?
Mayor Mike Remington.
Mayor Pro Tem, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve, you know, some of these items have little, if any, value, and sometimes you can spend more time trying to get a dollar out of something that you're better off to just donate someplace. Because I've been through that process. Other times we ask other departments in the city or other places in the city might say, hey, I could use that. We can fix it up. It has some value to us. The time and expense for us to fix some of these, you know, 18-year-old mower may just not be worth it. So do we have opportunities to see if there's other places in the organization or the community that can use those items? Or are we required by our own code and processes to put those out for, see if we can sell them?
It is, I guess, we have found the lack of overall policy, so we defer to RCWs for how and what we dispose. These items here, we typically, like you said, we will go and ask other departments, and somehow Public Works is the clearinghouse for all the surplus items, so we kind of handle that and then just dispose of them. If they are broken, we don't really need to bring them forward. Should they have value, if we think they're more than $50, we will go through the process of putting them on a list and see if we can get anything out of them. We try to put what the item is on there, right? You know, item number 3, you know, it needs a rebuilt carburetor, has no oil. So we put a lot of time into it. They are older items. And at some point, you know, the level of effort you put into them doesn't pay off. You know, the Ryan lawnmower, for example, needs $3,000 worth of engine work. That's on an 18-year-old frame that's got God knows how many miles of Duval mowing on it. So we do try. The 4-door pickup that the crew has is a hand-me-down from the police. So sometimes they'll each want their own weed eater. Police never ask for a weed eater. So there's some things that nobody does want because it infers they have to do some kind of work for it. So, or with it. But yeah, we do ask.
Well, thanks. I just, part of my own education, I realize that below a certain amount, it's easier just to, you know, have a process to move those on as quickly as we can and not try to spend too much of our time trying to get, you know, $20 out of something that, you know, just not worth our time and energy.
Well, and keeping things around, you know, what we have, what we don't have is space. So space is a premium in all of our buildings. So this takes up, you know, one garage in the shop down at the treatment plant offices that we're trying to repurpose for keeping new equipment in and taking better care of what we have since we have such, you know, small amount of space. So sooner the better we get rid of this stuff.
Thank you. If you see or recommend a policy change from you, the mayor, that's something we can do to help speed that process up, especially on items that don't have a value, it's still public property, and we can't just, you know, some items we just throw away. It's broken, it's no good, it's not, has no value. But some we're required to kind of show that we've shifted it on, moved it on, sold it. But if there's a policy change that you recommend, especially on some of these items that allow us to speed that process up, I realize utilities and others need a public process, but let us know if you see something we can do.
Mayor, I think you might be muted or we can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I'm using the external speaker, so it didn't show me my mute up there. Councilmember Naplin had a comment.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing up my question that I sent to you ahead of time. It sounds like you're having a conversation. You'll kind of maybe after you have some more time to discuss, you'll come forward with a recommendation. Is that kind of where we stand on where we'll deposit the funds?
Yeah, you know, oh.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Dana Mason, Finance Director. So typically for surplus items, they should go back to the fund from which they were purchased. But like Steve said, sometimes you can not just figure out what fund it came from. And in that case, the amount's probably going to be minimal. So we could just deposit it into the general fund.
So it would go into the general fund rather than the equipment and vehicle fund, because before that was kind of the idea is that it would just all go back into the fund that purchases things. It's such a confusing thing. I'll give you the example of what made me really be more aware of this is that we were going to sell the stage, and within the stage kind of agreement, we had borrowed, and we had used money from REIT because we didn't have enough money, but we knew that when we sold the stage, that was supposed to provide money for the new stage. So we really would want to probably repay REIT back. And I think it was actually in the agenda bill that was the intention. And when the stage actually, I don't even know, I think it sold, but whenever we decided we were going to sell it, there really wasn't anything to document for finance if they were to receive the money, what to do with the money. And so I thought that it might be more transparent and more clear for finance when they receive money for things. If in the surplus order, it just was really clear, here's where the money is going to go if we get any, just so there's no confusion. Because when I had been looking at the budget from prior years, there was money deposited all over the place in categories called surplus all over, and there didn't really seem to be a real rhyme or reason. It was a little confusing. And so I just thought it might clear things up. I mean, a lot of these, you're right, have almost no value. But for example, the stage, the charger, those are higher dollar items. And just for clarity, I thought it might be helpful to have that included.
Right. So typically in finance, if we got something from a check from a surplus sale, we would investigate. If we didn't already have the information, we would try to see where that piece of equipment came from. Yeah. And then put it in that fund.
So I was just thinking, at the time we do the resolution, you might as well just make it clear, and then you don't have to go back and research it. It's just already done. So anyway, that was just my suggestion and why I brought it up. So.
Right. Any further discussion on this item?
I think one thing, Mayor, to be clear, we purchase things out of the equipment fund, but a new piece of equipment, say we have 10 police cars and we're going to have an 11th. A new one will come from the fund that needs the unit. When you purchase it, it goes into the program to then be replaced out of the equipment fund. So that we were talking about those financing strategies. Are you taking enough money out of each fund each year to fully finance the replacement at year 10?
Right.
Or are you counting on a deficiency or then the surplus item to be part of that reinvestment to get the replacement? So just how the financing is created. I'm not saying we do that now, but it's just something to think about as we do move forward. But yeah.
Great. Thank you. So we'll bring this back for a public hearing and after more internal discussion. So we'll move on to our second item of new business, Agenda Bill 20-52, resolution affirming the June 2nd, 2020 declaration of emergency. And council does need to take action this evening, but Ms. Keffer can advise me if we need an amendment to fill in the termination date, which should be today, or if that's just what's filled in.
For the record, Eileen Kiefer, interim city attorney for City of Duval. You will note that when we were putting together the resolution affirming the emergency proclamation, I spoke with the chief and the mayor, and I said, well, when should we have this terminate? And I think the thinking was we were going to look to see whether there was any issues over the weekend, and so having none. What I had suggested was perhaps it terminates as of tomorrow, because then you'd have some symmetry between the emergency ordinance that also expires tomorrow. That way you just have those two things going together, expiring on the same day. Theoretically, you could have a termination date of a different date, but like I said, I suggested tomorrow as some sort of symmetry, but that is something that council should discuss and will need a motion on.
Council discussion on this? Councilmember Lingle.
We decided to use the ordinance to deal with the current state of affairs.
Right.
And I don't want us to lose track of the desire to look at this in a more permanent way. Yep. And I believe everybody got a copy of some of the things that Council Member Mayor Pro Tem Mike Remington shared as other ways that things are done. So I don't want to lose track of that need, because I do think this is the type of thing that requires public involvement.
Mhm.
So if we extend this, for example, where does that leave us with the next step?
Oh, Ms. Kiefer.
Oh, I just want to be clear. This is just a resolution affirming the emergency proclamation that the mayor made way back. I think it was June 2nd.
Yes.
So this
Right.
isn't an extension of the emergency orders ordinance or anything. This is really just to affirm her emergency proclamation, mostly to aid with the budget. I think there will be an additional budgetary piece that needs to come forward. Ms. Mason can speak to that, but there was some, I think, police overtime in the last 2 weeks, and that's really why we need this ratified. So I just want to be clear that this isn't an extension, is not an extension of the ordinance. It's just a resolution ratifying the emergency declaration.
Any other council discussion?
For
Councilmember Hoag and then Councilmember Iyer.
We don't have numbers yet on how much it has cost above.
We don't have overtime numbers yet. No, I mean, this is literally just the last week and a half.
Okay.
We did have, to be clear, there was information coming in even through the weekend that was troublesome. So I would have to double check with Chief to see if anybody worked overtime over the weekend, because there were rumors of a larger protest coming to town that didn't come to fruition. There was a bunch of online, a bunch of chatter about showing up to celebrate the president's birthday with weapons and what have you. And so that was the concern that we had continuing through the weekend. But yeah, when Chief gets back and they're done with payroll, we should be able to have solid numbers on that. Councilmember Iyer.
For process of understanding how emergencies declarations work, could you talk us through we affirm this, how does that change anything from just I don't remember us affirming every other emergency that's come through. I mean, I guess what context, and I'm not saying that, I just want to understand the process. So say if people said, no, we don't affirm this, what does that mean?
We might not be eligible for overtime reimbursement if it becomes a declared emergency. I mean, that's the simplest understanding. Ms. Kiefer, if Sean was here, he could definitely explain it pretty well as well.
Sure, and I think one of the things that we've identified is the Duval Code is a little sparse when it comes to emergencies and emergency management and how the workflow goes, as well as your emergency management plan. But based on the statutes and based on the lack of code, it is typical for councils to affirm proclamations of emergency. I know you guys did that with the COVID emergency. There was a resolution. The mayor had issued a proclamation, and then you guys affirm it. And the reason for the workflow is just the mayor can do that more expediently. You guys meet approximately only every 2 weeks. But it is a sort of a check and balance of the mayor issues the proclamation of emergency and then council ratifies it. And so what that does is it, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this, but it authorizes purchases and ratifies those purchases made during the emergency. So I hope that helps, Councilmember Iyer.
And that is pretty standard in every other city that is going through this. I don't know of a council that hasn't, affirmed the declarations of emergency for COVID or for civil unrest or what have you. Councilmember.
Yeah, and I'm not proposing that anyone does that, but sometimes the best way to understand something is to, get the explanation of the inverse outcome
Yeah, and that's a good reminder that if folks haven't completed their council FEMA training, every council member is supposed to complete a core level of FEMA classes, and most of which are available online. And there are specific classes for elected officials as well that help understand the process and why we do what we do in emergency management. So Councilmember Lingle.
This might not be the right time to have this discussion, and so I'm just going to throw it out as a subject, and that is that with this, you're going to use COVID as an example. I think we now understand that the COVID situation is going to be with us for quite some time, and that a lot of what has happened in the last few months, we have, I think, appropriately been planning for and budgeting for and so forth, and there'll need to be some more. But we now have entered a stage of new normal. And so I think that at some point we should go back and look at the original emergency declaration and decide what the new normal is. And we have to be careful how we do that, because it's not that we want to disrupt funding. So I'm just going to end there. It's a subject. I think it's something we should put on the table and talk about.
Absolutely. And I know that from my perspective, when Mr. Tozer returns from vacation, that'll be part of our discussion, because we know that this is with us for a long time. We just don't know we don't know if we're going to have a second wave where everything shuts down again. And I think that's where part of the challenge in determining when to stop the state of emergency. I know that I prefer to take my guidance from the state public health officials on this one. But that is part of the discussion that we'll be having internally, especially if we get approval to move into phase 2 and how that looks. But it's, you don't want to have a state of emergency for a year. You don't want that. But if we're forced into that situation, we are. But we'd like to be able to go back to a new normal as soon as possible. And I think we still got to have a ways to figure out what that actually looks like. Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand that we did, under this declaration, spend funds for overtime for our officers. Did we spend any funds on equipment, other things related to the emergency?
Not that I know of, no. It was just, there may have been meals during command staff time, but that's pretty standard in any declared emergency, is to feed the people that are on shift.
And my understanding on the declaration is that if council affirms the declaration, it seems odd because it's after the fact, but that's the way it works. So I understand the questions, but I just wanted to understand that it expires tomorrow.
Yep.
So even if we're affirming that we did this and we're doing that in case funding happened to be available from the state or county, that we'd be eligible because it was an official declaration of emergency. But in terms of practicality, it expires tomorrow. So this was relatively short-lived.
Yes. Ms. Kiefer?
And just again, we still have a placeholder for the date on the ratification. So again, just want to remind y'all that we're going to need a motion to have this end, have the emergency end tomorrow, if that's council's will.
Well, Mayor, with that, I would make a motion that we modify the resolution to include the expiration date as June 17th, 2020.
All right, do we have discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the...
We have a second, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Naplin?
Okay, thank you, sorry.
So with that, all those in favor of the motion with the expiration date of June 17th, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Passes unanimously. Thank you, guys. Hopefully we won't ever have to...
I'm sorry, Mayor, Mike Remington, do I need to make a motion now that we pass the resolution, or? So I would make a motion that council pass Agenda Bill 20-52, resolution affirming the June 2nd, 2020 declaration of emergency, with the understanding that we've amended it with an expiration date of June 17th, 2020.
Michelle Hogue, second.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes unanimously, and just hopefully we won't have to do one like that ever again. And to the point of the policy suite, we've got a lot, we're identifying a lot more that needs to be updated and right-sided. It was good for the city 10 years ago, but with what we're seeing weather-wise and everything else, there's some major updates to be made, and so we'll be bringing those forth, hopefully as a package over the summer. And that should also provide some opportunity for additional training for council folks as well if you're needing more information on FEMA emergency management practices. So next up is Agenda Bill 20-53, City Attorney Services General Municipal Law Contract Template. And so this is council's baby. And if you want more discussion, great. If you want to take a motion and get it approved, that works as well.
Mayor Mike Remington.
Yes.
First, just say thank you to our Finance Administration Committee for all their work, and city staff, and you, Mayor. And with that, I would move that City Council approve Agenda Bill 20-53, City Attorney Services General Municipal Law Contract Template.
Jennifer Naplin, second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Jody, did you get the first and the second? Mayor Pro Tem first, Councilmember Naplin. Okay, any further discussion on this item? Councilmember Hogue?
So I thought that we had agreed unanimously to have a minimum insurance of 2 million, 2 million. And I noticed there's an option 6 still in here that says 1 million, 3 million. So is that, I guess we should have a discussion about whether that one should be removed, or did the council still want that one in there?
Well, the 2 and 2 should be in there, correct?
It is, yeah. A 1 and a 3.
I don't see any harm in having an additional option because a different council later on might have but it's up to you guys if you want to remove that or not. Councilmember McHenry and then Councilmember Lingle.
I thought what Councilmember Hogue is talking about, I thought we had shifted to talking about the specific contract with a law firm maybe, and not the template. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember.
That was my understanding as well, which is why I didn't remove it for the packet. But
okay,
it can be amended at any time you guys choose.
Maybe you're right. Yeah.
Councilmember Lingle.
Let's see. I wanted to make sure I wasn't muted. The thing I think we have to remember about this template is it's designed to work for a lot of different types of attorney contracts. And so if you have an agreement with an attorney that has a broad scope and a lot more risk, you're going to want to pick or desire a higher level of insurance versus someone that's doing something very limited in scope and low risk. And I think the other point is that, when you examine law firms to do something, it might be that a law firm simply already has a higher level of insurance. And the point I made in our discussion was that, for example, in our Madrona contracts, they have a cumulative professional liability insurance of 3 million. Well, the insurance folks said that the first amount and the second amount usually match. So that would be a point of resolving with a law firm. If they had a 1 million and a 3 million, how do we get that to work so that they match? So that was one point I wanted to make about the specifics of the insurance. And then the other thing is that we have to remember as a template that you're going to have modifications periodically when a contract comes before council on paragraph 1, which is scope and schedule of services, and the actual exhibit A, that will periodically change. But the idea here was to get the main form of contract in place so we're not constantly spending a bunch of money starting from scratch on every single legal contract, because it's just too expensive to work that way. So those are just reminders of why we did it the way we did it. Mm-hmm. And I think Council Member Naplin at the time was the one that said, you know, she's looking for on the specific contract we'll be looking at next time. I do believe she was the one that said a minimum of 2 and 2.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. It's already late. I'm losing track. Did we get the motion? I think we had the motion already, correct? Okay. Yeah. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. And then we'll move on to 2 items of unfinished business. Agenda Bill 20-39. Resolution for the 21 to 26 6-year TIP program. So if council has questions for Mr. Laniszewski, now's the time.
Good evening again, council and mayors, citizens. Steve Laniszewski, Public Works. So in the staff report, there was an element that we were concerned with timing and hearing back from Commerce. We actually had a conference video with them today. They did clarify this is not a comprehensive plan update or an amendment. It does not update our comprehensive element of the transportation program. So they do not give comment. So we are free to do as we wish. We opened the hearing, we closed the hearing, we received no comment. We have provided a list, which is a reflection of our transportation element of the comp plan, and it has been enhanced. So at this time, no further items from staff on it. So are there any questions? This will be helpful as we move forward into next month, because the middle of August 14th to be exact, the TIB grants are due. So we'll go through some assessment exercise again of what we want to apply for, should we choose to want to apply for grants, and use this again as our base tool. So that's all I have. Questions, comments?
Councilmember Naplin.
I've been thinking about the upcoming budget and also some of the feedback we received on the 275th project. Just, questions. What's your priority? How do we decide what we're spending our money on? And the list that we have within this isn't necessarily prioritized. But what I want to know is going forward, when we're talking about what projects we may include in the next biennium, is that something that we could do, have more of a public discussion? I know sometimes we react to grant opportunities, and so you don't always know what you're going to spend your money on, but often we do put a couple projects in, and I feel like the community is really interested in how we're spending our money and what improvements we're doing, and have a lot of feedback for us. And this might be a good time once we finish this, once the list of possible projects, is finalized through this, the next step I see is asking the community and looking at budget and what resources we have available to start prioritizing with the community what we want to pursue next. So I'm just curious, I know it's not 100% about what we need to do before we approve this, but it's kind of an extension of what does this document mean and where do we go from here?
I don't know if anybody else wants to take a crack at what it means, but what it is a summary that we issue to the state so they can use as a tool to understand the deficiencies in our city. They compile that in the region, they add that to a state amount, and then that's submitted to the feds on all the infrastructure that the federal government tries to understand is out there for improvement. It helps us establish our own program. It summarizes what is TIF, traffic impact fee eligible, because it is growth related. So it is a summary document. The transportation element of our comprehensive plan is the overarching tool we have. This is kind of a mere summary. I don't know if Eileen has anything to add to that, but kind of what it is. And I understand the need or desire to prioritize. I just don't know that there ever is a perfect assessment of what that means and when it is. For the item of grants, we talked 2 or 3 meetings ago on the CDBG grant application, right? So that's nowhere near budget cycle time, but if we did move forward to the next phase of that, by the way. I haven't shared that yet, so we've successfully moved on. Not been awarded yet by any means, but we're in the next step. So that's the hard thing. All of the granting agencies, their application deadlines and timelines do not match up. So if we want to, there are things we don't need grants to do. So we could prioritize smaller projects and go forward without grant applications. So there's a lot to do. This is just one tool that we are required to provide to the state. We always have this list. It's not like it changes. We have the transportation element of our comp plan. That's what guides our work programming per se, but prioritization of this is not required, so we don't do it, nor do many others as far as putting a number 1 through 30 on their list. So flexibility is paramount, and it's up to us, like you said. So how do we get there? We have to have more discussions, I guess.
Ms. Kiefer, did you have something to add?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. I think Steve said it beautifully. This is just one of the tools. This is one of the things that you guys are required to do by July 1st, but it's been my experience that, yeah, flexibility is absolutely key. This is, this is one of your tools, but it's not all of your tools. And really there's going to be a lot of other things that you take into account when you figure out which projects are going to be implemented when. And the grant funding is really going to play a huge piece of that.
Councilmember Lingle.
I'm really glad that the block grant project got mentioned, because I've been thinking about that project a bit. To me, Councilmember Naplin's point, and something I'm a bit concerned about on that project as well, is what is our citizen participation policy? Because the core tenet of community development block grant is community-based involvement. And, we only, I guess from what Steve was saying last time, is that, we don't really have that many block grant eligible areas, but I think the value, when I say value, I don't mean as in, I mean like principle, ethic, is of community notification and how we formalize that process. And I haven't seen any kind of policy in Duval that does it. I know that we do the minimum, but when you're talking about something that's going to impact a whole neighborhood, it seems like there should be some discussion about how we're going to work with that neighborhood. And particularly if it's a neighborhood that might be a neighborhood where people are more economically challenged, like the one that would be impacted by the block grant. So my question to Steve on that project is, I thought what I heard was that you would talk to the property owner. Is that correct?
No, the property owner does not live in the city. We've talked to the property manager.
Mm-hmm.
So
what is our strategy to talk to the people that live there?
We're going to have to go send an announcement in multi-language and see if we get comments. I mean, tonight, I don't want to.
No, you don't have to elaborate. I'm just saying you have.
This is an important document that we had no comments on, right? So I don't know how else we want to generate comments, because it's even easier now to make a comment because you can just show up, virtually. So I don't know, maybe We looked at planning to see how they go. We have had a couple people engaged in public hearings, but those were adjacent owners. So that was something on development stuff we've had recently, but not a lot of input, which makes it hard because we are guessing for the most part on the need because we don't hear what it is. You know, the 275th project's been good because even though people seem to be opposed to vegetation issues, they all like the project or want more. Like, oh, can we get sidewalk up from the corner to our neighborhood? Can we get more lights? Can we do this? So there is discussion. I don't know how to generate it amongst the community other than, you know, open houses. You've got to, I don't think you can have those in one spot. Maybe here and there you'd have to have them, you know.
Well, maybe that's something we should talk about separately from the council meeting then. Because as you know, transportation projects can have unintended consequences. So I think we should talk about citizen participation at some point.
So I'll jump in really quick since Steve, asked community development. We're known for doing a lot of public participation and process. The majority of our big policy lifts, I will draft a public participation plan that outlines what the process is from start to finish. Most of our code type things that are mandates require public participation because I have to report to Commerce or Ecology, or if I have a grant, I actually have to submit a public participation plan. That hasn't been necessarily the same for like TIB money or community block grant. But what we've done historically is, we'll hold, public engagement type meetings. We'll invite the neighborhood. You can do some tabletop exercise, but usually that's not necessarily when we're per se applying for a grant application. Sometimes it's like, we try to see if, are we close to getting it, and just knowing what a dollar value is, and then creating a public plan around those dollars. But we do try to at least make contact with property owners that could be impacted before that.
And I think it's important to note that all of these projects are, they're in a plan that's been publicly accessible and publicly, lots of public participation over time. I think one of the challenges, there's always ways to improve the public engagement and process, is what you don't want is neighborhoods fighting against each other for resources, especially when the resources are only for a specific use. So for example, I had a conversation with a constituent about the 275th project and had to explain that there's nothing that's the only project that we could use that money on, and that there are strings attached. And I think, the challenge of having that conversation is transportation funding itself is extraordinarily complex, as is transportation planning. And you have to, and how that's approached has to be very delicate, so that you're not actually creating more discord within the community. The sidewalks thing is that's been an issue since I moved here. And for overall feedback is every time we put a sidewalk in, people are happy. They may say, oh, I wish we could get one here or there. But overall, in my time here, every time we complete a missing link or provide more walkable space, no matter where it is, the community's thankful overall. Councilmember Lingle?
In the case of the block grant project, I understand the value of completing the sidewalk. I also know, and I'm sure our public works director is very familiar with how unintended consequences sometimes occur from transportation improvements, even though the improvements are desirable. And in the case of the block grant project, we have a situation where there's a property owner and we have a community of people that are living in units and they don't own the property that's underneath them. And in addition to that, we have a population in that neighborhood where English may be their second language. And so it's a situation where I think we need to do a little additional thinking. But in general, I think that when we're looking at projects, we should try to figure out a few other steps to engage the neighborhood. But in that project case in particular, I'm concerned because in my professional experience, what I have seen many times is a transportation improvement, while very needed and desirable, what it does is it also increases the value of the property to the property owner. And in this situation, that benefit could actually end up displacing a bunch of people. So we have to think this very carefully in how we proceed with that one. And I've just seen it over many examples. I don't think we want anybody to accuse us of being Robert Moses, and I know Steve knows who that is.
So we were a little off topic. So if we get back to the TIP program, as Mr. Laniszewski said, we do need a vote on this evening to make our deadline. So if there isn't any further discussion specific to the TIP, I would appreciate entertaining a motion. Ms. Thomas first.
So we need a recommendation from Planning Commission, and I checked in with our staff, so Troy Davis, our senior planner, and they just had it. And it would have been nice if they'd made a recommendation that evening, but it didn't happen. And so it still has to go back to Planning Commission next week, I believe. And then council will see it again on July 7th for final approval.
I wasn't aware. I hadn't got, they had.
I wasn't aware of that either.
I thought they did, Laura. Did you check with them recently?
I checked with them, yeah.
Oh, because I thought the staff report said that they did give their recommendation.
Let's double check the staff report now and let's.
Yeah.
What it says, that's what I was informed of. So
Yeah.
what it says.
We wouldn't, I mean, if I'd been aware of it not being approved through Planning Commission yet, then it wouldn't have been on the agenda tonight.
So Steve, you were at the, sorry, I'm interrupting because that's what he said to me yesterday. But Steve, you were at the meeting. I was doing administration work. Did they vote? No, it was Larissa. Yeah, so we don't
That was the
know.
graduation stuff, yeah.
Let me, you know
I was
what?
told
If
it
you,
was.
let me, I'm gonna make contact with them really quick. If we, let me see if I can get a hold of them really quick. Is that okay if I take a break for like 90 seconds?
Yeah, and we just have one last item on the
I
agenda.
know, it's mine. Give me just a second. I'm going to go off video.
Need somebody to entertain us now. Guitar, anything.
I want to see the kids come in and get kissed goodnight. That's just
My son's sitting observing this meeting, drinking his ice water right now.
And have a parade of children.
No,
I just
Grayson, it's
want to say that I'm impressed how still everyone can sit and stare at the camera the whole time. I can't do it. I'm impressed. Mike, the chair, I need that chair to like maybe be like a restrain me and hold my head out while I do
So
it.
somebody asked me about this chair and they said, so that's a pretty fancy chair. And I said, you understand that I have a cardboard backdrop and I'm sitting in a folding chair right now. That's just for looks. Well, there you go, Mayor. There's what we needed right there. Hi.
So I just talked to Troy. Planning Commission did not make a recommendation
Okay.
at the meeting.
Then I guess we are going to have to push this off. If I was aware of that, we wouldn't have had it on the agenda. So we will be late on our recommendation. Okay, Grayson, past your bedtime, please.
Can I ask a quick question? Eileen, is this something that would be eligible for a consent agenda? There's no reason why we couldn't have it on consent, correct?
So, I mean, I am unaware of anything that would say that you couldn't have it on your consent agenda. You've already had a public hearing. Unless you have discussion about it, I mean, honestly, it's your rules as to what you put on consent, what you pull off consent, as to what you want to discuss. You know, I will note that the statute does technically require you to adopt this by July 1st. I know staff has, I guess, had some conversations with planning about, you know, will this or will it not affect grant eligibility? You may want to think about having a special meeting. I just want to put that out there that technically the statute does say you do have to do this by July 1st. So something to think about whether or not this would just be a real quick 20-minute special meeting.
They approve it pursuant to Planning Commission approval or recommendation?
Contingent upon that. I haven't seen that done, but I'm hard pressed to say that that wouldn't be proper. I mean, it's absolutely backwards of how we usually do things, right? Planning Commission gives you guys a recommendation. You are the legislative body, council, not Planning Commission. So that would be a very strange delegation of authority to them. I don't know if you would be comfortable with that. So if Planning Commission, Laura, what date does Planning Commission meet next week?
So Planning Commission is on the 24th. I believe we have a budget retreat on the 30th, Mr. Remington.
Yes, that's true. So we could add that. I would recommend we not add that proviso, even if we could. The council does not want to be leading the Planning Commission or getting into their affairs. We even avoid attending those meetings. So I think that even if they were watching this tonight and said, gee, council approved it, so I guess the pressure's on, we don't want to add that to them. We could easily add that as an agenda item on the June 30th budget meeting and say, you know, that's unfinished business. We can just address that early on and then move on to the budget discussions.
I like that idea, if that's what it takes to get it done the right way.
So, question for legal then. We took this to hearing stating we have Planning Commission recommendation. So
we'll do, perhaps we have to do another.
You opened it, you closed it again.
So you can hold
last week's meeting was just a,
yeah. So you can hold a public hearing without a recommendation by a board. I mean, you can do that. We've done that before with other.
That's not my point. My point was the staff report said we had it. The staff report said I had a recommendation.
Well, it seems like we are where we are, so let's move on. I mean,
so we need to know if we need to have another hearing then too.
Right, like, and I honestly just do not know that one off the top of my head. Let me look into that, get you a recommendation tomorrow. It could be that you need to have another public hearing on the 30th, but I just don't know that off the top of my head. I'll get you an answer tomorrow.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to the last item of unfinished business, Agenda Bill 20-41, Ordinance for Utility Service for Occupancy.
That was exciting. So good evening, Mayor and Council. So we've been coming forward for the last several meetings on the utility ordinance for occupancy. And I updated the agenda bill to include the questions that we received at the last council meeting. So just to go over it, you know, since we have members of the public in attendance, that would have been at our 6-2 meeting. So one of the questions that we received at the meeting, which was a really good question, by the way, is how do we compare to other cities for utility disconnections? So finance staff looked made contact with Carnation, Sultan, Snohomish, Monroe, because those are kind of our near comparables. So Carnation has about 1,000 customers and they have 0 to 3 disconnections per month. Honestly, they were kind of a bright and shining star out there. That's a really low disconnection rate. Sultan has about 1,900 customers and they have about 27 disconnections per month. So about 1.4% of their utility rate payers. Snohomish has about 4,500 customers and they average 10 to 14. So they're like, you know, 0.25% essentially of, you know, that receives a disconnection notice. Monroe has about 6,000 customers and they average about 75 disconnections. So they have, it's about a full percentage point. Again, Duval, we have 2,779 customers and we have about on average 15 disconnections. so just under 0.5%. So that was one of the questions. The other one, and we talked a little bit about this at the meeting, which was, are there special circumstances? The majority of the disconnections are repeat disconnections. That's the substantial, and that's pretty consistent. We were also asked, what is the current billing process? And I have to admit, I think we need to be working on this policy update. And we've talked to Dana. Finance is actually working on that policy update. I think it can be, they're always confusing no matter what city you're in. Everybody has different dates and different processes. But utility bills are processed around the 24th of each month. Those balances would be due on the 20th of the following month. Our code currently says that they are due on the 20th of the month in which billed, policy update pending. We used to bill at the beginning of the month, but due to meter reading changing sorry, this is what I got, to 21st century technology, they've made that change, and so the bills can go out sooner. If the balance remains unpaid after the 20th, a past due notice along with a 10% late fee is mailed to the customer. If this balance remains unpaid by the 14th day of the following month, the account receives a pending disconnection notice along with a $20 fee. If the account remains unpaid after 5 business days, the water service is disconnected and a $35 water turn-on fee is applied. The customer is required to pay the entire delinquent balance in order to restore the water service. Although the caveat I would say with that is they can work with the finance department on an agreement to pay over time. The next question was, how does this relate to the sewer comp plan update? And what I would say is the sewer comp plan update includes a rate study, so future utility rates could go either up or down. I don't know what the answer is to that currently. We also had the question on composting toilets. Are they allowed? Currently, our policy requires all structures to connect to sanitary sewer systems. So right now, that wouldn't be something that's allowed. Today, I received a couple of additional emails. The first one was they just, Councilmember Naplin asked some additional questions, and I did send that out to council, unfortunately, just before the meeting with the response. So again, the finance department responded to it. And a second, let me get to my paperwork. So let's see. For the most part, it was a scenario question, which was, how does this work if it was a $200 bill and it was due on the 9th? And so Stephanie, responded to that. Hopefully, I don't want to go completely into the email response for that. So hopefully you'll be able to take a look at that because she detailed it out. But again, there are some there were some administrative or mayor choices previously to our current mayor administration on some nuanced changes that really probably need to be codified, honestly. So you'll notice that because that's what was said in that email to me that I forwarded to you. The other question that we received is essentially, how does this relate to our lower income families? And so the last update to our ordinance for establishing discounts for low income utility customers was completed in 2011, and it's defined obviously by HUD. So I sent an email back, I gave you the ordinance, and then I also provided the link to what the 2020 HUD value is. So it's about $113,000 in King County. So when you look at discount rates for extremely low incomes, which is 20% discount on the base rate for utilities, very low income would be 15% discount rate. and low income discount rate. So this policy probably should be updated. I am not familiar enough with federal or state rules around this on what we, can do at the, kind of at that maximum level. So we'll need to do, I think, a little bit more research on that item. Are there any continued questions? Yes,
Mike
Councilmember.
Remington, Laura. My biggest concern was unintended consequences, especially with COVID-19. More folks that may be in trouble, don't have the income to be able to help pay basic utilities. And, there's always a place where you have to say, we have to make a decision to help protect the rest of our citizens so that others just aren't footing the bill. And I appreciate the discussion on low income, and I do think we need to continue to take a look at that and see if we need to update our policy. But I get concerned. We know we have an increase in late payments. It seemed last time I looked that there's enough time for people to contact us, work with us, set something up with finance department to at least say, hey, we're in the rears, give us some help here. But I just want to make sure one of these unintended consequences, because the purpose we're doing this is for somebody that's moved into a place that had utilities shut off and, a squatter that is living, maybe even with the approval of the owner, but it's raised some questions and concerns in neighborhoods. So this is citizens that brought up this concern. But I want to make sure that we're not going to be injuring others that are just in tough financial times. And I'm still trying to reconcile that. I want to give the police the tools they need, but I certainly don't want to turn around and find out, we've literally told people they have to move out of a place while they're just struggling. And I just want to make sure that we've discussed that and are approaching this with a caring heart for those that are in trouble right now.
I can say that, as long as we're under the COVID emergency, our utility ordinance and the deferred payments exist. So during the COVID emergency, I don't see that as big of an issue. But what I do see is an opportunity. So we're going to start receiving our $1,406 soon. And for some of those folks, we're working with HopeLink to try and develop an agreement so that they can distribute the funding. They're already working with a lot of these clients. And what I foresee is that 1406 funding and other funding we receive could be used to help those people get back to where they need to be so that they aren't getting turned off. It is complex and it's all really good questions. The intent is not to kick somebody who's hard on their luck out, but there are, as we've had situations in the last year, people intentionally living without these services, which creates the health, life, and safety issue. But if we need to put something into the ordinance that declares that it doesn't take effect until a year from now, which would hopefully be through the COVID stuff, I completely support that. But I just want to make sure that that we have something in place over the long term. But we can also find creative ways to reach out to these folks and get them the help that they need if they're people that actually need help. We also need to think about those people that just flat out choose not to have the service to pay for it. People that choose not to have garbage or what have you. And there are other issues going on typically in those households when that occurs as well. So it can provide an opportunity to get them support and services that they need. So Councilmember Lingle and then Napland.
Yeah, I mean, what you just got me thinking about is it would be interesting to hear from HopeLink about, you've mentioned that, they do some of this now. It'd be interesting to learn something a little more from them about how they process things. And that might give us more insight to how we're doing our billing.
Councilmember Nafland?
I think everyone knows this, but City of Duval has an incredibly high average household income. I believe it's over 140,000. So the proportion of our residents that are in that lower income category is fairly small compared to potentially some of these other cities we compared ourselves to. So I still feel like the number of disconnects feels high for our community, and I really appreciate the diversity of income levels, and I don't want to put more of that diversity out because of policies, people falling behind. So anyway, my biggest concern is unintended consequences. I don't want people squatting in properties that don't have adequate service. So I fully support the intent. I just want to make sure we don't harm those that are already struggling. So just to follow up on what Councilmember Iyer has brought to our attention about the discounts and you know, have we updated the income ranges, things like that. I don't know if this would come when we update our water rates or sewer rates, but I would like to take a deeper dive on this, and maybe it needs to be another agenda bill, but just to talk about the timing of the disconnect, because really the disconnect order occurs before the next bill is even late. So they aren't even 30 days late on their payment, and we're already disconnecting their service. And I just think about some people, how they do their billing. They might have in their head, oh, my bill is due on the 20th. And somehow they haven't dealt with their pile of mail and didn't notice, and they go to pay their second bill. They've already got a disconnect notice on their door. And so, and I just think of all the staff time it would take. You have to deliver the disconnect notice, then you have to disconnect, then you have to come back and reconnect. We don't have a lot of extra staff time. Our staff is incredibly busy. We often end up having to utilize overtime. So I'm just wondering, cost reward on this thing, that we're spending an awful lot of staff time and effort that potentially, if we extended that time frame just a little bit more, these people would not have had to pay all of these fees. We wouldn't have wasted staff time, and we would have gotten the money in the door to make the payment. So just kind of fiddle around with the timing to see if we can get the money in the door and have less disruption to those people and to our staff. So that's my request.
So what it sounds like to me from council, because I don't want to keep bringing back the same policy and just getting more questions, honestly, that's just not a good use of all of our time. So I think I see, like, you know, potentially what the mayor said, which is a different date, also bring in Hope Link. But what I'm thinking, what we really need in tandem is really an update to the policy of how we do the billing. It's not necessarily just the policy, it's our existing policy of how we do the bills, is what I'm hearing, Councilmember Naflin. Okay, so let me work with the finance department and with Dana and see how far along we've come along with our policy update. I know one thing that Stephanie did tell me is that by the time they get shut off, they're 2 months in the rears. So and that's in the email that I sent out to council right before the council meeting. And I honestly didn't have time to read it either, but I wanted to get it to you. So I'll read that as well, and we'll go back and look at it. And then this would be something that the Finance Administration Committee could look at. So what I would do maybe is put the policy on hold and look at what our existing billing policy is, if that's what council would like.
Ms. Mason?
And I just wanted to say that Stephanie has been working on updating the utility billing ordinances, because there's a lot of contradictions. And then also that there is something coming from the governor's office where we're going to have to come up with a payment plan for COVID-related late payments. Yeah. So they are going to come up with the terms for us for those payments for those customers.
Councilmember Iyer?
I think I think it's a needed tool, definitely for incidents of folks squatting in structures that aren't intended to house people, and I definitely I support it, but I definitely think we should do it in tandem with updating, at a minimum, updating the percentage, updating the income and percentage, and I guess what I heard is that there's a limit, so you can't just make up the percentage of discount. That it sounds like there's federal limits to what, I guess it's a gift of public funds or something, but maybe. But I'd like to hear more about how we come up with those numbers. Is that up? Who, you know, what discretion do we have? Is there any discretion? And I think that it would be appropriate to, you know, pass that in tandem with this. The only other recommendation that I could possibly think of in the same vein as the billing, you know, that if we can eke out another 5 days, if that does anything to reduce the issues that we have, is, you know, add some additional days to the investigation and enforcement. It's just so hard separating this from, you know, thinking of a house with a shut off versus just somebody living in an outbuilding. But that could be a potential area where you could, you know, just add some certainty that this is a situation that needs to be addressed with this level of force. Is there any chance, I guess the only thing I'd be hesitant about is I'd be more likely to move this forward if we feel like there's no way we're going to get to the billing portion, and then maybe just separate out the reduction in rates. I mean, are we anywhere close to getting, I mean, is this something we'll be able to get to this year? I don't mean, I mean that respectfully.
Yeah, as you can see just tonight, I think we've identified at least 5 additional policies that have to be worked on. It's a heavy weight. So Ms. Mason, did you want to comment on that? It's your team.
Yeah, so Stephanie she's got a draft ready. It's just the timing, I mean, and priorities. So we want to get the procurement policy done. And then I think there's the reserve policies that we need to look at. And then we have the personnel policy. So there's just a lot that could be in front, or we can make this a priority if needed. So, but she does have a draft ready.
And the easiest way might be able to, you know, it could take a simple amendment that the ordinance doesn't take effect until the billing and discount procedures are updated.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't have to bring it back. Councilmember McHenry.
I agree with a lot of the comments other council members made. And I like Director Thomas's recommendation. To your point, Mira, the only thing that popped into my head is what if, as we go through that other chunk, that we think of things we want to change in here. So I'm just trying to think if there's a real benefit to passing it now that it'll take effect in a year, or if we should just wait and do it all together.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It doesn't really matter. I mean, the key right now is that COVID impacts it as it is. So, you know, we can hold off on it a while longer. We just do need to get something in place. And of course, we don't want to shut off the people that are down in their luck. We want to find ways to get them supported and helped. But we also have those folks that just flat out just never pay their bills on time, but they pay their bills. They just, you know, have to get shut off notices to do it.
The other thing that I was going to say, Mayor, I mean, because we've talked about this, is, you know, the policy that we're drafting, it is not going to be triggered very often. You know, because I asked our teams, like, okay, if this policy were in place, how many times would we have seen it in the last X years? And it looks like it would have been twice in the last decade.
Yeah. But the 2 times it has happened, it took a significant amount of resources to get that taken care of as well. As far as people living without services. So it sounds like folks want to move this to come and coincide with the billing updates. And that's fine unless somebody's, Councilmember Iyer.
I think in terms to, I think if the shut off order is not extended past August, I think we should, and we should bring it back in September and see where we're at if those other things have not occurred, if those other issues have not been brought forward. Hopefully they extend the shut off order, and then I think it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, I think they will. All right, so it sounds like we have direction. We're not going to move it forward tonight. So unless there's further discussion on this item, then,
Mike Remington?
Oh, yes, Mayor Pro Tem Remington.
I apologize.
No, you're fine.
I'm kind of waiting to the end of our discussion. I wanted to just recognize a moment on behalf of council, the work that Laura's done, taking on the additional assistant city administrator work, well beyond what she and the police chief had offered to do. We have had a ton of challenging issues for all of us to deal with, but many of those fell on their laps in terms of, working with us and developing the information that we need as city council. She's taken personal time from her family, and she's already a director of such an incredibly busy department, and she's worked extremely well with us. I think she sets such a good example in several areas, but she's straightforward and a good communicator, but shows empathy with where others stand. She works her tail off to really be able to demonstrate what I think is really the kind of city we like to be, where we seek to reach agreement and have open discussion about things that we don't agree on. So I just wanted to thank her personally, and certainly on behalf of council, to recognize the incredible work that she's done. We feel blessed to have her in the city, thankful that she's our director for community development, and look forward to trying to be part of the solution for being able to get a city administrator full time. It's been over a year since we've talked about it, and hopefully the budget will be such in the near future that we can look at it again. So thank you, Laura.
Yes, and thank you. And we do need to have a celebration for these two. Everything is so weird with the Zoom meetings, and so expect some sort of celebration when we actually all get together in person again. And if it looks like it's going to be too long, we're just going to have to do it virtually. But I was hoping that we can honor both of them together, hopefully at some point this summer, to honor the extraordinary work and efforts that they've put towards the city, especially in the last 2 years. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and with that, if we have no further business, we are adjourned. All right. Thanks all. Have a good night.